You are using Google Kubernetes Engine with autoscaling enabled to host a new application. You want to expose this new application to the public using HTTPS on a public IP address. What should you do? A. Create a Kubernetes service of type node port for your application and a Kubernetes ingress to expose this service via a cloud load balancer. B. Create a Kubernetes service of type cluster IP for your application. Configure the public DNS name of your application using the IP of this service. C. Create a Kubernetes service of type node port to expose the application on port 443 of each node of the Kubernetes cluster. Configure the public DNS name of your application with the IP of every node of the cluster to achieve load balancing. D. Create a HAProxy pod in the cluster to load balance the traffic to all the pods of the application. Forward the public traffic to HAProxy with an IP table rule. Configure the DNS name of your application using the public IP of the node HAProxy is running on. You want to configure an SSH connection to a single compute engine instance for users in the Dev1 group. This instance is the only resource in this particular Google Cloud Platform project that the Dev1 users should be able to connect to. What should you do? A. Set metadata to enable uslogin equals true for the instance. Grant the Dev1 group the compute alt-ls login role. Direct them to use the Cloud Shell to SSH to that instance. B. Set metadata to enable uslogin equals true for the instance. Set the service account to no service account for that instance. Direct them to use the Cloud Shell to SSH to that instance. C. Enable block project-wide keys for the instance. Generate an SSH key for each user in the Dev1 group. Distribute the keys to Dev1 users and direct them to use their third-party tools to connect. D. Enable block project-wide keys for the instance. Generate an SSH key and associate the key with that instance. Distribute the key to Dev1 users and direct them to use their third-party tools to connect. You have just created a new project which will be used to deploy a globally distributed application. You will use Cloud Spanner for data storage. You want to create a Cloud Spanner instance. You want to perform the first step in preparation of creating the instance. What should you do? A. Enable the Cloud Spanner API. B. Configure your Cloud Spanner instance to be multi-regional. C. Create a new VPC network with subnetworks in all desired regions. D. Grant yourself the IAM role of Cloud Spanner admin. You need to provide a cost estimate for a Kubernetes cluster using the GCP pricing calculator for Kubernetes. Your workload requires high IOPs, and you will also be using disk snapshots. You start by entering the number of nodes, average hours, and average days. What should you do next? A. Fill in local SSD. Fill in persistent disk storage and snapshot storage. B. Fill in local SSD. Add estimated cost for cluster management. C. Select Add GPUs. Fill in persistent disk storage and snapshot storage. D. Select Add GPUs. Add estimated cost for cluster management. You are building a new version of an application hosted in an App Engine environment. You want to test the new version with 1% of users before you completely switch your application over to the new version. What should you do? A. Deploy a new version of your application in Google Kubernetes Engine instead of App Engine, and then use GCP Console to split traffic. B. Deploy a new version of your application in a Compute Engine instance instead of App Engine, and then use GCP console to split traffic. C. Deploy a new version as a separate app in App Engine. Then configure App Engine using GCP console to split traffic between the two apps. D. Deploy a new version of your application in App Engine. Then go to App Engine settings in GCP console and split traffic between the current version and newly deployed versions accordingly. You've deployed a microservice called MyApp1 to a Google Kubernetes Engine cluster using the YAML file specified below. You need to refactor this configuration so that the database password is not stored in plain text. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Store the database password inside the Docker image of the container, not in the YAML file. B. Store the database password inside a secret object. Modify the YAML file to populate the DB_password environment variable from the secret. C. Store the database password inside a config map object. Modify the YAML file to populate the DB_password environment variable from the config map. D. Store the database password in a file inside a Kubernetes persistent volume and use a persistent volume claim to mount the volume to the container. You are deploying an application to App Engine. You want the number of instances to scale based on request rate. You need at least 3 unoccupied instances at all times. Which scaling type should you use? A. Manual scaling with 3 instances. B. Basic scaling with min_instances set to 3. C. Basic scaling with max_instances set to 3. D. Automatic scaling with min_idle_instances set to 3. You have an application that looks for its licensing server on the IP 10.0.3.21. You need to deploy the licensing server on Compute Engine. You do not want to change the configuration of the application and want the application to be able to reach the licensing server. What should you do? A. Reserve the IP 10.0.3.21 as a static internal IP address using GayCloud and assign it to the licensing server. B. Reserve the IP 10.0.3.21 as a static public IP address using GreeCloud and assign it to the licensing server. C. Use the IP 10.0.3.21 as a custom ephemeral IP address and assign it to the licensing server. D. Start the licensing server with an automatic ephemeral IP address and then promote it to a static internal IP address. The core business of your company is to rent out construction equipment at large scale. All the equipment that is being rented out has been equipped with multiple sensors that send event information every few seconds. These signals can vary from engine status, distance traveled, fuel level, and more. Customers are billed based on the consumption monitored by these sensors. You expect high throughput up to thousands of events per hour per device and need to retrieve consistent data based on the time of the event. Storing and retrieving individual signals should be atomic. What should you do? A. Create a file in cloud storage per device and append new data to that file. B. Create a file in Cloud File Store per device and append new data to that file. C. Ingest the data into Data Store. Store data in an entity group based on the device. D. Ingest the data into Cloud Bigtable. Create a row key based on the event timestamp. You are creating a Google Kubernetes Engine (GKE) cluster with a cluster autoscaler feature enabled. You need to make sure that each node of the cluster will run a monitoring pod that sends container metrics to a third-party monitoring solution. What should you do? A. Deploy the monitoring pod in a stateful set object. B. Deploy the monitoring pod in a daemon set object. C. Reference the monitoring pod in a deployment object. B. Reference the monitoring pod in a cluster initializer at the GKE cluster creation time. You have two subnets, Subnet A and Subnet B, in the default VPC. Your database servers are running in Subnet A. Your application servers and web servers are running in Subnet B. You want to configure a firewall rule that only allows database traffic from the application servers to the database servers. What should you do? A. Create service accounts SAAP and SADB. Associate service account SAAP with the application servers and the service account SADB with the database servers. Create an ingress firewall rule to allow network traffic from source service account SAAP to target service account SADB. B. Create network tags AppServer and DBServer. Add the AppServer tag to the application servers and the DBServer tag to the database servers. Create an egress firewall rule to allow network traffic from source network tag AppServer to target network tag DBServer. C. Create a service account SAAP and a network tag DBServer. Associate the service account SAAP with the application servers and the network tag DBServer with the database servers. Create an ingress firewall rule to allow network traffic from source VPC IP addresses and target the subnet A IP addresses. D. Create a network tag AppServer and service account SADB. Add the tag to the application servers and associate the service account with the database servers. Create an egress firewall rule to allow network traffic from source network tag AppServer to target service account SADB. You need to manage a Cloud Spanner instance for best query performance. Your instance in production runs in a single Google Cloud region. You need to improve performance in the shortest amount of time. You want to follow Google best practices for service configuration. What should you do? A. Create an alert in Cloud Monitoring to alert when the percentage of high-priority CPU utilization reaches 45%. If you exceed this threshold, add nodes to your instance. B. Create an alert in Cloud Monitoring to alert when the percentage of high-priority CPU utilization reaches 45%. Use database query statistics to identify queries that result in high CPU usage, and then rewrite those queries to optimize their resource usage. C. Create an alert in Cloud Monitoring to alert when the percentage of high-priority CPU utilization reaches 65%. If you exceed this threshold, add nodes to your instance. D. Create an alert in Cloud Monitoring to alert when the percentage of high-priority CPU utilization reaches 65%. Use database query statistics to identify queries that result in high CPU usage, and then rewrite those queries to optimize their resource usage. You have a project for your App Engine application that serves a development environment. The required testing has succeeded, and you want to create a new project to serve as your production environment. What should you do? A. Use Google Cloud to create the new project, and then deploy your application to the new project. B. Use gCloud to create the new project, and to copy the deployed application to the new project. C. Create a deployment manager configuration file that copies the current App Engine deployment into a new project. D. Deploy your application again using gCloud and specify the project parameter with the new project name to create the new project. You need to create a custom IAM role for use with a GCP service. All permissions in the role must be suitable for production use. You also want to clearly share with your organization the status of the custom role. This will be the first version of the custom role. What should you do? A. Use permissions in your role that use the supported support level for role permissions. Set the role stage to alpha while testing the role permissions. B. Use permissions in your role that use the supported support level for role permissions. Set the role stage to beta while testing the role permissions. C. Use permissions in your role that use the testing support level for role permissions. Set the role stage to alpha while testing the role permissions. D. Use permissions in your role that use the testing support level for role permissions. Set the role stage to beta while testing the role permissions. You are using Data Studio to visualize a table from your data warehouse that is built on top of BigQuery. Data is appended to the data warehouse during the day. At night, the daily summary is recalculated by overwriting the table. You just noticed that the charts in Data Studio are broken, and you want to analyze the problem. What should you do? A. Review the error reporting page in the Cloud Console to find any errors. B. Use the BigQuery interface to review the nightly job and look for any errors. C. Use Cloud Debugger to find out why the data was not refreshed correctly. D. In Cloud Logging, create a filter for your Data Studio report. You need to set a budget alert for use of Compute Engineer services on one of the 3 Google Cloud Platform projects that you manage. All 3 projects are linked to a single billing account. What should you do? A. Verify that you are the project billing administrator. Select the associated billing account and create a budget and alert for the appropriate project. B. Verify that you are the project billing administrator. Select the associated billing account and create a budget and a custom alert. C. Verify that you are the project administrator. Select the associated billing account and create a budget for the appropriate project. D. Verify that you are project administrator. Select the associated billing account and create a budget and a custom alert. You significantly changed a complex deployment manager template and want to confirm that the dependencies of all defined resources are properly met before committing it to the project. You want the most rapid feedback on your changes. What should you do? A. Use granular logging statements within a deployment manager template authored in Python. B. Monitor activity of the deployment manager execution on the Stackdriver logging page of the GCP console. C. Execute the deployment manager template against a separate project with the same configuration and monitor for failures. D. Execute the deployment manager template using the Euro preview option in the same project and observe the state of interdependent resources. Your organization has a dedicated person who creates and manages all service accounts for Google Cloud projects. You need to assign this person the minimum role for projects. What should you do? A. Add the user to roles/IAM, role admin role. B. Add the user to roles/IAM, security admin role. C. Add the user to roles/IAM service account user role. D. Add the user to roles/IAM service account admin role. You are building an application that processes data files uploaded from thousands of suppliers. Your primary goals for the application are data security and the expiration of aged data. You need to design the application to restrict access so that suppliers can access only their own data. Give suppliers write access to data only for 30 minutes. Delete data that is over 45 days old. You have a very short development cycle, and you need to make sure that the application requires minimal maintenance. Which two strategies should you use? Choose two. A. Build a lifecycle policy to delete cloud storage objects after 45 days. B. Use signed URLs to allow suppliers limited time access to store their objects. C. Set up an SFTP server for your application and create a separate user for each supplier. D. Build a cloud function that triggers a timer of 45 days to delete objects that have expired. A. Develop a script that loops through all cloud storage buckets and deletes any buckets that are older than 45 days. Your continuous integration and delivery (CI/CD) server can't execute Google Cloud Actions in a specific project because of permission issues. You need to validate whether the used service account has the appropriate roles in the specific project. What should you do? A. Open the Google Cloud Console and check the Identity and Access Management (IAM) roles assigned to the service account at the project or inherited from the folder or organization levels. B. Open the Google Cloud Console and check the organization policies. C. Open the Google Cloud Console and run a query to determine which resources this service account can access. D. Open the Google Cloud Console and run a query of the audit logs to find permission denied errors for this service account. You are building an application that stores relational data from users. Users across the globe will use this application. Your CTO is concerned about the scaling requirements because the size of the user base is unknown. You need to implement a database solution that can scale with your user growth with minimum configuration changes. Which storage solution should you use? A. Cloud SQL. B. Cloud Spanner. C. Cloud Firestore. D. Cloud Data Store. Your managed instance group raised an alert stating that new instance creation has failed to create new instances. You need to solve the instance creation problem. What should you do? A. Create an instance template that contains valid syntax which will be used by the instance group. Delete any persistent disks with the same name as instance names. B. Create an instance template that contains valid syntax that will be used by the instance group. Verify that the instance name and persistent disk name values are not the same in the template. C. Verify that the instance template being used by the instance group contains valid syntax. Delete any persistent disks with the same name as instance names. Set the disks auto-delete property to true in the instance template. D. Delete the current instance template and replace it with a new instance template. Verify that the instance name and persistent disk name values are not the same in the template. Set the disks auto-delete property to true in the instance template. You have successfully created a development environment in a project for an application. This application uses Compute Engine and Cloud SQL. Now you need to create a production environment for this application. The security team has forbidden the existence of network routes between these two environments, and has asked you to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Create a new project, enable the Compute Engine and Cloud SQL APIs in that project, and replicate the setup you have created in the development environment. B. Create a new production subnet in the existing VPC and a new production Cloud SQL instance in your existing project, and deploy your application using those resources. C. Create a new project, modify your existing VPC to be a shared VPC, share that VPC with your new project, and replicate the setup you have in the development environment in that new project in the shared VPC. D. Ask the security team to grant you the project editor role in an existing production project used by another division of your company. Once they grant you that role, replicate the setup you have in the development environment in that project. Your company has a single sign-on (SSO) identity provider that supports Security Assertion Markup Language (SAML) integration with service providers. Your company has users in Cloud Identity. You would like users to authenticate using your company's SSO provider. What should you do? A. In Cloud Identity, set up SSO with Google as an identity provider to access custom SAML apps. B. In Cloud Identity, set up SSO with a third-party identity provider with Google as a service provider. C. Obtain OAuth 2.0 credentials, configure the user consent screen, and set up OAuth 2.0 for mobile and desktop apps. D. Obtain OAuth 2.0 credentials, configure the user consent screen, and set up OAuth 2.0 for web server applications. You want to select and configure a solution for storing and archiving data on Google Cloud Platform. You need to support compliance objectives for data from one geographic location. This data is archived after 30 days and needs to be accessed annually. What should you do? A. Select multi-regional storage. Add a bucket lifecycle rule that archives data after 30 days to cold line storage. B. Select multi-regional storage. Add a bucket lifecycle rule that archives data after 30 days to nearline storage. C. Select regional storage. Add a bucket lifecycle rule that archives data after 30 days to nearline storage. D. Select regional storage. Add a bucket lifecycle rule that archives data after 30 days to cold line storage. You want to send and consume CloudPub/Sub messages from your App Engine application. The CloudPub Sub API is currently disabled. You will use a service account to authenticate your application to the API. You want to make sure your application can use CloudPub/Sub. What should you do? A. Enable the CloudPub Sub API in the API library on the GCP console. B. Rely on the automatic enablement of the CloudPub Sub API when the service account accesses it. C. Use Deployment Manager to deploy your application. Rely on the automatic enablement of all APIs used by the application being deployed. D. Grant the App Engine default service account the role of CloudPub Sub admin. Have your application enable the API on the first connection to CloudPub Sub. You are deploying a production application on Compute Engine. You want to prevent anyone from accidentally destroying the instance by clicking the wrong button. What should you do? A. Disable the flag OEuro delete boot disk when instance is deleted. AC Euro. B. Enable delete protection on the instance. C. Disable automatic restart on the instance. D. Enable preemptibility on the instance. Your company has embraced a hybrid cloud strategy where some of the applications are deployed on Google Cloud. A virtual private network (VPN) tunnel connects your virtual private cloud (VPC) in Google Cloud with your company's on-premises network. Multiple applications in Google Cloud need to connect to an on-premises database server, and you want to avoid having to change the IP configuration in all of your applications when the IP of the database changes. What should you do? A. Configure Cloud NAT for all subnets of your VPC to be used when egressing from the VM instances. B. Create a private zone on Cloud DNS and configure the applications with the DNS name. C. Configure the IP of the database as custom metadata for each instance, and query the metadata server. D. Query the Compute Engine internal DNS from the applications to retrieve the IP of the database. Your company runs its Linux workloads on Compute Engine instances. Your company will be working with a new operations partner that does not use Google accounts. You need to grant access to the instances to your operations partner so they can maintain the installed tooling. What should you do? A. Enable Cloud IAP for the Compute Engine instances and add the operations partner as a Cloud IAP tunnel user. B. Tag all the instances with the same network tag. Create a firewall rule in the VPC to grant TCP access on port 22 for traffic from the operations partner to instances with the network tag. C. Set up Cloud VPN between your Google Cloud VPC and the internal network of the operations partner. D. Ask the operations partner to generate SSH key pairs and add the public keys to the VM instances. You are building an application that will run in your data center. The application will use Google Cloud Platform (GCP) services like AutoML. You created a service account that has appropriate access to AutoML. You need to enable authentication to the APIs from your on-premises environment. What should you do? A. Use service account credentials in your on-premises application. B. Use gCloud to create a key file for the service account that has appropriate permissions. C. Set up direct interconnect between your data center and Google Cloud Platform to enable authentication for your on-premises applications. D. Go to the IAM and admin console, grant a user account permissions similar to the service account permissions, and use this user account for authentication from your data center. You deployed an App Engine application using Glaz eCloud App Deploy, but it did not deploy to the intended project. You want to find out why this happened and where the application deployed. What should you do? A. Check the app YAML file for your application and check project settings. B. Check the web application.xml file for your application and check project settings. C. Go to Deployment Manager and review settings for deployment of applications. D. Go to Cloud Shell and run Google Cloud Config List to review the Google Cloud configuration used for deployment. You need to grant access for 3 users so that they can view and edit table data on a Cloud Spanner instance. What should you do? A. Run gCloud IAM roles describe roles/spanner. Database user. Add the users to the role. B. Run gCloud IAM roles describe roles/spanner. Database user. Add the users to a new group. Add the group to the role. C. Run Cloud IAM roles describe roles/spanner. Viewer. Project My project. Add the users to the role. D. Run Google Cloud IAM roles, describe roles, /spanner. Viewer. Project my project. Add the users to a new group. Add the group to the role. You need to manage multiple Google Cloud projects in the fewest steps possible. You want to configure the Google Cloud SDK Command Line Interface (CLI) so that you can easily manage multiple projects. What should you do? A1. Create a configuration for each project you need to manage. 2. Activate the appropriate configuration when you work with each of your assigned Google Cloud projects. B1. Create a configuration for each project you need to manage. 2. Use CanCloud Init to update the configuration values when you need to work with a non-default project. C1. Use the default configuration for one project you need to manage. 2. Activate the appropriate configuration when you work with each of your assigned Google Cloud projects. D1. Use the default configuration for one project you need to manage. 2. Use Google Cloud Init to update the configuration values when you need to work with a non-default project. You have an application on a general-purpose compute engine instance that is experiencing excessive disk read throttling on its zonal SSD persistent disk. The application primarily reads large files from disk. The disk size is currently 350 gigabytes. You want to provide the maximum amount of throughput while minimizing costs. What should you do? A. Increase the size of the disk to 1 terabyte. B. Increase the allocated CPU to the instance. C. Migrate to use a local SSD on the instance. D. Migrate to use a regional SSD on the instance. All development, dev, teams in your organization are located in the United States. Each dev team has its own Google Cloud project. You want to restrict access so that each dev team can only create cloud resources in the United States, US. What should you do? A. Create a folder to contain all the dev projects. Create an organization policy to limit resources in US locations. B. Create an organization to contain all the dev projects. Create an identity and access management (IAM) policy to limit the resources in US regions. C. Create an identity and access management (IAM) policy to restrict the resources locations in the US. Apply the policy to all dev projects. A. Create an identity and access management (IAM) policy to restrict the resources locations in all dev projects. Apply the policy to all dev roles. You have deployed multiple Linux instances on Compute Engine. You plan on adding more instances in the coming weeks. You want to be able to access all of these instances through your SSH client over the internet without having to configure specific access on the existing and new instances. You do not want the Compute Engine instances to have a public IP. What should you do? A. Configure Cloud Identity Aware Proxy for HTTPS resources. B. Configure Cloud Identity Aware Proxy for SSH and TCP resources. C. Create an SSH key pair and store the public key as a project-wide SSH key. D. Create an SSH key pair and store the private key as a project-wide SSH key. You want to find out when users were added to Cloud Spanner Identity Access Management (IAM) roles on your Google Cloud Platform (GCP) project. What should you do in the GCP console? A. Open the Cloud Spanner console to review configurations. B. Open the IAM and Admin Console to review IAM policies for CloudSpanner roles. C. Go to the Stackdriver Monitoring Console and review information for CloudSpanner. D. Go to the Stackdriver Logging Console, review admin activity logs, and filter them for CloudSpanner IAM roles. Your company completed the acquisition of a startup and is now merging the IT systems of both companies. The startup had a production Google Cloud project in their organization. You need to move this project into your organization and ensure that the project is billed to your organization. You want to accomplish this task with minimal effort. What should you do? A. Use the project's move method to move the project to your organization. Update the billing account of the project to that of your organization. B. Ensure that you have an Organization Administrator Identity and Access Management (IAM) role assigned to you in both organizations. Navigate to the Resource Manager in the startup's Google Cloud organization and drag the project to your company's organization. C. Create a private catalog for the Google Cloud Marketplace and upload the resources of the startup's production project to the catalog. Share the catalog with your organization and deploy the resources in your company's project. D. Create an infrastructure as code template for all resources in the project by using Terraform and deploy that template to a new project in your organization. Delete the project from the startup's Google Cloud organization. You need to reduce GCP service costs for a division of your company using the fewest possible steps. You need to turn off all configured services in an existing GCP project. What should you do? A. 1. Verify that you are assigned the project owner's IAM role for this project. 2. Locate the project in the GCP console, click Shut Down, and then enter the project ID. B. 1. Verify that you are assigned the project owner's IAM role for this project. 2. Switch to the project in the GCP console, locate the resources, and delete them. C. 1. Verify that you are assigned the Organizational Administrator IAM role for this project. 2. Locate the project in the GCP console, enter the project ID, and then click Shut Down. D. 1. Verify that you are assigned the Organizational Administrator's IAM role for this project. 2. Switch to the project in the GCP console, locate the resources, and delete them. Your organization has user identities in Active Directory. Your organization wants to use Active Directory as their source of truth for identities. Your organization wants to have full control over the Google accounts used by employees for all Google services, including your Google Cloud Platform (GCP) organization. What should you do? A. Use Google Cloud Directory Sync (GCDS) to synchronize users into Cloud Identity. B. Use the Cloud Identity APIs and write a script to synchronize users to Cloud Identity. C. Export users from Active Directory as a CSV and import them to Cloud Identity via the Admin Console. D. Ask each employee to create a Google account using self-signup. Require that each employee use their company email address and password. Your organization has strict requirements to control access to Google Cloud projects. You need to enable your Site Reliability Engineers, SREs, to approve requests from the Google Cloud Support Team when an SRE opens a support case. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Add your SREs to roles/IAM, role admin role. B. Add your SREs to role/access approval. Approver role. C. Add your SREs to a group, and then add this group to roles/IAM, role admin, role. D. Add your SREs to a group, and then add this group to roles/access approval, approver role. Your finance team wants to view the billing report for your projects. You want to make sure that the finance team does not get additional permissions to the project. What should you do? A. Add the group for the finance team to roles/billing user role. B. Add the group for the finance team to roles/billing admin role. C. Add the group for the finance team to roles/billing viewer role. D. Add the group for the finance team to roles/billing project manager role. Your company's infrastructure is on-premises, but all machines are running at maximum capacity. You want to burst to Google Cloud. The workloads on Google Cloud must be able to directly communicate to the workloads on-premises using a private IP range. What should you do? A. In Google Cloud, configure the VPC as a host for shared VPC. B. In Google Cloud, configure the VPC for VPC network peering. C. Create Bastion hosts both in your on-premises environment and on Google Cloud. Configure both as proxy servers using their public IP addresses. D. Set up Cloud VPN between the infrastructure on-premises and Google Cloud. You are migrating a production-critical on-premises application that requires 96 vCPUs to perform its task. You want to make sure the application runs in a similar environment on GCP. What should you do? A. When creating the VM, use machine type N1 standard 96. B. When creating the VM, use Intel Skylake as the CPU platform. C. Create the VM using Compute Engine default settings. Use G-Cloud to modify the running instance to have 96 vCPUs. D. Start the VM using Compute Engine default settings and adjust as you go based on right-sizing recommendations. You have a Google Cloud Platform account with access to both production and development projects. You need to create an automated process to list all compute instances in development and production projects on a daily basis. What should you do? A. Create 2 configurations using catcloud config. Write a script that sets configurations as active individually. For each configuration, use GKCloud compute instances list to get a list of compute resources. B. Create 2 configurations using gsutil config. Write a script that sets configurations as active individually. For each configuration, use gsutil compute instances list to get a list of compute resources. C. Go to Cloud Shell and export this information to cloud storage on a daily basis. D. Go to GCP console and export this information to Cloud SQL on a daily basis. Your organization uses G Suite for communication and collaboration. All users in your organization have a G Suite account. You want to grant some G Suite users access to your cloud platform project. What should you do? A. Enable cloud identity in the GCP console for your domain. B. Grant them the required IAM roles using their G Suite email address. C. Create a CSV sheet with all users' email addresses. Use the GKCloud command line tool to convert them into Google Cloud Platform accounts. D. In the G Suite console, add the users to a special group called email@example.com. Rely on the default behavior of the cloud platform to grant users access if they are members of this group. You are operating a Google Kubernetes Engine (GKE) cluster for your company, where different teams can run non-production workloads. Your machine learning (ML) team needs access to NVIDIA Tesla P100 GPUs to train their models. You want to minimize effort and cost. What should you do? A. Ask your ML team to add the Bo-Euro accelerator, GPU or Euro annotation to their pod specification. B. Recreate all the nodes of the GKE cluster to enable GPUs on all of them. C. Create your own Kubernetes cluster on top of Compute Engine with nodes that have GPUs. Dedicate this cluster to your ML team. D. Add a new GPU-enabled node pooled to the GKE cluster. Ask your ML team to add the cloud.google.com/A-key accelerator NVIDIA Tesla P100 node selector to their pod specification. You need to deploy an application, which is packaged in a container image, in a new project. The application exposes an HTTP endpoint and receives very few requests per day. You want to minimize costs. What should you do? A. Deploy the container on Cloud Run. B. Deploy the container on Cloud Run on GKE. C. Deploy the container on App Engine Flexible. D. Deploy the container on GKE with cluster autoscaling and horizontal pod autoscaling enabled. You are hosting an application on bare metal servers in your own data center. The application needs access to cloud storage. However, security policies prevent the servers hosting the application from having public IP addresses or access to the internet. You want to follow Google recommended practices to provide the application with access to cloud storage. What should you do? A. 1. Use NSLookup to get the IP address for storage.googleapis.com. 2. Negotiate with the security team to be able to give a public IP address to the servers. 3. Only allow egress traffic from those servers to the IP addresses for storage.googleapis.com. B. 1. Using Cloud VPN, create a VPN tunnel to a virtual private cloud, VPC, in Google Cloud. 2. In this VPC, create a Compute Engine instance and install the Squid proxy server on this instance. 3. Configure your servers to use that instance as a proxy to access cloud storage. C1. Use Migrate for Compute Engine, formerly known as Vellustrata, to migrate those servers to Compute Engine. 2. Create an internal load balancer, ILB, that uses storage.googleapis.com as backend. 3. Configure your new instances to use this ILB as proxy. D1. Using Cloud VPN or Interconnect, create a tunnel to a VPC in Google Cloud. 2. Use Cloud Router to create a custom route advertisement for 199.36.153.4/30. Announce that network to your on-premises network through the VPN tunnel. 3. In your on-premises network, configure your DNS server to resolve *googleapis.com as a CNAME to restricted.googleapis.com. You need to set up permissions for a set of Compute Engine instances to enable them to write data into a particular cloud storage bucket. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Create a service account with an access scope. Use the access scope https://www.googlew.com /auth/devstorage.write_only single quote. B. Create a service account with an access scope. Use the access scope https://www.googlifist.com/auth/cloud-platform single quote. C. Create a service account and add it to the IAM role storage object creator for that bucket. D. Create a service account and add it to the IAM role storage object admin for that bucket. You are building a pipeline to process time series data. Which Google Cloud Platform services should you put in boxes 1, 2, 3, and 4? A. Cloud Pub Sub, Cloud Dataflow, Cloud Data Store, BigQuery. B. Firebase Messages, Cloud Pub Sub, Cloud Spanner, BigQuery. C. Cloud Pub Sub, Cloud Storage, BigQuery, Cloud Bigtable. D. Cloud Pub Sub, Cloud Dataflow, Cloud Bigtable, BigQuery. You have one GCP account running in your default region and zone, and another account running in a non-default region and zone. You want to start a new Compute Engine instance in these two Google Cloud Platform accounts using the command line interface. What should you do? A. Create two configurations using recloud-config configurations. Create handname. Run cloud-config configurations. Activate NAMIM to switch between accounts when running the commands to start the Compute Engine instances. B. Create two configurations using cloud config configurations. Create NAME. Run GRUT Cloud Configurations list to start the Compute Engine instances. C. Activate two configurations using GRE Cloud Configurations. Activate NAME. Run gcloud config list to start the Compute Engine instances. D. Activate two configurations using Cloud Configurations. Activate NAME. Run GRUT Cloud Configurations list to start the Compute Engine instances. You have a single binary application that you want to run on Google Cloud Platform. You decided to automatically scale the application based on underlying infrastructure CPU usage. Your organizational policies require you to use virtual machines directly. You need to ensure that the application scaling is operationally efficient and completed as quickly as possible. What should you do? A. Create a Google Kubernetes Engine cluster and use horizontal pod autoscaling to scale the application. B. Create an instance template and use the template in a managed instance group with autoscaling configured. C. Create an instance template and use the template in a managed instance group that scales up and down based on the time of day. D. Use a set of third-party tools to build automation around scaling the application up and down based on Stackdriver CPU usage monitoring. You need to run an important query in BigQuery, but expect it to return a lot of records. You want to find out how much it will cost to run the query. You are using on-demand pricing. What should you do? A. Arrange to switch to flat rate pricing for this query, then move back to on-demand. B. Use the command line to run a dry run query to estimate the number of bytes read. Then convert that bytes estimate to dollars using the pricing calculator. C. Use the command line to run a dry run query to estimate the number of bytes returned. Then convert that bytes estimate to dollars using the pricing calculator. D. Run a select count asterisk to get an idea of how many records your query will look through. Then convert that number of rows to dollars using the pricing calculator. You need to update a deployment in Deployment Manager without any resource downtime in the deployment. Which command should you use? A. G-Cloud Deployment Manager deployments create, config. B. G-Cloud Deployment Manager deployments update, config. C. G-Cloud Deployment Manager resources create, config. D. G-Cloud Deployment Manager resources update, config. Your development team needs a new Jenkins server for their project. You need to deploy the server using the fewest steps possible. What should you do? A. Download and deploy the Jenkins JavaWar to App Engine standard. B. Create a new Compute Engine instance and install Jenkins through the command line interface. C. Create a Kubernetes cluster on Compute Engine and create a deployment with the Jenkins Docker image. D. Use GCP Marketplace to launch the Jenkins solution. You have a Docker file that you need to deploy on Kubernetes Engine. What should you do? A. Use kubect lapp deploy. B. Use G-Cloud app deploy. C. Create a Docker image from the Docker file and upload it to Container Registry. Create a deployment YAML file to point to that image. Use kubectl to create the deployment with that file. D. Create a Docker image from the Docker file and upload it to cloud storage. Create a deployment YAML file to point to that image. Use kubectl to create the deployment with that file. You have a website hosted on App Engine standard environment. You want 1% of your users to see a new test version of the website. You want to minimize complexity. What should you do? A. Deploy the new version in the same application and use the Migrate option. B. Deploy the new version in the same application and use the Splits option to give a weight of 99 to the current version and a weight of 1 to the new version. C. Create a new App Engine application in the same project. Deploy the new version in that application. Use the App Engine library to proxy 1% of the requests to the new version. D. Create a new App Engine application in the same project. Deploy the new version in that application. Configure your network load balancer to send 1% of the traffic to that new application. You are building a data lake on Google Cloud for your Internet of Things IoT application. The IoT application has millions of sensors that are constantly streaming structured and unstructured data to your backend in the cloud. You want to build a highly available and resilient architecture based on Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Stream data to PubSub and use Dataflow to send data to cloud storage. B. Stream data to PubSub and use Storage Transfer Service to send data to BigQuery. C. Stream data to Dataflow and use DataPrep by Trifacta to send data to Bigtable. D. Stream data to Dataflow and use Storage Transfer Service to send data to BigQuery. You want to permanently delete a pub subtopic managed by Config Connector in your Google Cloud project. What should you do? A. Use kubectl to create the label deleted by CNRM and to change its value to true for the topic resource. B. Use kubectl to delete the topic resource. C. Use G-Cloud CLI to delete the topic. D. Use GCloud CLI to update the topic label managed by CNRM to false. Your team is running an on-premises e-commerce application. The application contains a complex set of microservices written in Python, and each microservice is running on Docker containers. Configurations are injected by using environment variables. You need to deploy your current application to a serverless Google Cloud solution. What should you do? A. Use your existing CI/CD pipeline. Use the generated Docker images and deploy them to Cloud Run. Update the configurations and the required endpoints. B. Use your existing continuous integration and delivery CI/CD pipeline. Use the generated Docker images and deploy them to Cloud Function. Use the same configuration as on-premises. C. Use the existing codebase and deploy each service as a separate Cloud Function. Update the configurations and the required endpoints. D. Use your existing codebase and deploy each service as a separate Cloud Run. Use the same configurations as on-premises. You have been asked to set up the billing configuration for a new Google Cloud customer. Your customer wants to group resources that share common IAM policies. What should you do? A. Use labels to group resources that share common IAM policies. B. Use folders to group resources that share common IAM policies. C. Set up a proper billing account structure to group IAM policies. D. Set up a proper project naming structure to group IAM policies. You recently received a new Google Cloud project with an attached billing account where you will work. You need to create instances, set firewalls, and store data in cloud storage. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Use the gcloud CLI services enable Cloud Resource Manager.googleapis.com command to enable all resources. B. Use the gcloud services enable compute.googleapis.com command to enable Compute Engine and the gcloud services enable storage-ap.googleapis.com command to enable the cloud storage APIs. C. Open the Google Cloud Console and enable all Google Cloud APIs from the API dashboard. D. Open the Google Cloud Console and run gcloud init project in a Cloud Shell. You are planning to migrate the following on-premises data management solutions to Google Cloud. 1. MySQL cluster for your main database. Apache Kafka for your event streaming platform. 1. Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL database for your analytical and reporting needs. You want to implement Google recommended solutions for the migration. You need to ensure that the new solutions provide global scalability and require minimal operational and infrastructure management. What should you do? A. Migrate from MySQL to Cloud SQL, from Kafka to PubSub, and from Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL to BigQuery. B. Migrate from MySQL to Cloud Spanner, from Kafka to PubSub, and from Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL to BigQuery. C. Migrate from MySQL to Cloud Spanner, from Kafka to Memory Store, and from Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL to Cloud SQL. D. Migrate from MySQL to Cloud SQL, from Kafka to Memory Store, and from Cloud SQL for PostgreSQL to Cloud SQL. You are running a web application on Cloud Run for a few hundred users. Some of your users complain that the initial web page of the application takes much longer to load than the following pages. You want to follow Google's recommendations to mitigate the issue. What should you do? A. Set the minimum number of instances for your Cloud Run service to 3. B. Set the concurrency number to 1 for your Cloud Run service. C. Set the maximum number of instances for your Cloud Run service to 100. D. Update your web application to use the protocol HTTP 2 instead of HTTP 1.1. Your team wants to deploy a specific content management system, CMS, solution to Google Cloud. You need a quick and easy way to deploy and install the solution. What should you do? A. Search for the CMS solution in Google Cloud Marketplace. Use Greek Cloud CLI to deploy the solution. B. Search for the CMS solution in Google Cloud Marketplace. Deploy the solution directly from Cloud Marketplace. C. Search for the CMS solution in Google Cloud Marketplace. Use Terraform and the Cloud Marketplace ID to deploy the solution with the appropriate parameters. D. Use the installation guide of the CMS provider. Perform the installation through your configuration management system. You want to run a single caching HTTP reverse proxy on GCP for a latency-sensitive website. This specific reverse proxy consumes almost no CPU. You want to have a 30 GB in-memory cache and need an additional 2 GB of memory for the rest of the processes. You want to minimize cost. How should you run this reverse proxy? A. Create a cloud memory store for Redis instance with 2 GB capacity. B. Run it on Compute Engine and choose a custom instance type with 6 vCPUs and 32 GB of memory. C. Package it in a container image and run it on Kubernetes Engine using N1 standard 32 instances as nodes. D. Run it on Compute Engine. Choose the instance type N1 standard 1 and add an SSD persistent disk of 32 GB. You are working in a team that has developed a new application that needs to be deployed on Kubernetes. The production application is business critical and should be optimized for reliability. You need to provision a Kubernetes cluster and want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Create a GKE Autopilot cluster. Enroll the cluster in the Rapid Release Channel. B. Create a GKE Autopilot cluster. Enroll the cluster in the Stable Release Channel. C. Create a zonal GKE standard cluster. Enroll the cluster in the Stable Release Channel. D. Create a regional GKE standard cluster. Enroll the cluster in the Rapid Release Channel. You are running an application on multiple virtual machines within a managed instance group and have autoscaling enabled. The autoscaling policy is configured so that additional instances are added to the group if the CPU utilization of instances goes above 80%. VMs are added until the instance group reaches its maximum limit of 5 VMs, or until CPU utilization of instances lowers to 80%. The initial delay for HTTP health checks against the instances is set to 30 seconds. The virtual machine instances take around 3 minutes to become available for users. You observe that when the instance group autoscales, it adds more instances than necessary to support the levels of end-user traffic. You want to properly maintain instance group sizes when autoscaling. What should you do? A. Set the maximum number of instances to 1. B. Decrease the maximum number of instances to 3. C. Use a TCP health check instead of an HTTP health check. D. Increase the initial delay of the HTTP health check to 200 seconds. Your company has an internal application for managing transactional orders. The application is used exclusively by employees in a single physical location. The application requires strong consistency, fast queries, and ACID guarantees for multi-table transactional updates. The first version of the application is implemented in PostgreSQL, and you want to deploy it to the cloud with minimal code changes. Which database is most appropriate for this application? A. BigQuery. B. Cloud SQL. C. Cloud Spanner. D. Cloud Data Store. You have been asked to create robust virtual private network (VPN) connectivity between a new virtual private cloud (VPC) and a remote site. Key requirements include dynamic routing, a shared address space of 10.19.0.1/22, and no over-provisioning of tunnels during a failover event. You want to follow Google-recommended practices to set up a high-availability cloud VPN. What should you do? A. Use a custom mode VPC network, configure static routes, and use active/passive routing. B. Use an automatic mode VPC network, configure static routes, and use active/active routing. C. Use a custom mode VPC network, use Cloud Router Border Gateway Protocol (BGP) routes, and use active/passive routing. A. Use an automatic mode VPC network, use Cloud Router Border Gateway Protocol (BGP) routes, and configure policy-based routing. Your company is moving its entire workload to Compute Engine. Some servers should be accessible through the internet, and other servers should only be accessible over the internal network. All servers need to be able to talk to each other over specific ports and protocols. The current on-premises network relies on a demilitarized zone, DMZ, for the public servers, and a local area network, LAN, for the private servers. You need to design the networking infrastructure on Google Cloud to match these requirements. What should you do? A. 1. Create a single VPC with a subnet for the DMZ and a subnet for the LAN. 2. Set up firewall rules to open up relevant traffic between the DMZ and the LAN subnets, and another firewall rule to allow public ingress traffic for the DMZ. B. 1. Create a single VPC with a subnet for the DMZ and a subnet for the LAN. 2. Set up firewall rules to open up relevant traffic between the DMZ and the LAN subnets, and another firewall rule to allow public egress traffic for the DMZ. C. 1. Create a VPC with a subnet for the DMZ and another VPC with a subnet for the LAN. 2. Set up firewall rules to open up relevant traffic between the DMZ and the LAN subnets, and another firewall rule to allow public ingress traffic for the DMZ. D. 1. Create a VPC with a subnet for the DMZ and another VPC with a subnet for the LAN. 2. Set up firewall rules to open up relevant traffic between the DMZ and the LAN subnets, and another firewall rule to allow public egress traffic for the DMZ. You have developed an application that consists of multiple microservices, with each microservice packaged in its own Docker container image. You want to deploy the entire application on Google Kubernetes Engine so that each microservice can be scaled individually. What should you do? A. Create and deploy a custom resource definition per microservice. B. Create and deploy a Docker Compose file. C. Create and deploy a job per microservice. D. Create and deploy a deployment per microservice. You built an application on Google Cloud that uses Cloud Spanner. Your support team needs to monitor the environment, but should not have access to table data. You need a streamlined solution to grant the correct permissions to your support team, and you want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? A. Add the support team group to the roles/monitoring viewer role. B. Add the support team group to the roles/spanner database user role. C. Add the support team group to the roles/spanner database reader role. D. Add the support team group to the roles/stackdriver accounts viewer role. You are using Deployment Manager to create a Google Kubernetes Engine cluster. Using the same Deployment Manager deployment, you also want to create a daemon set in the kubesystem namespace of the cluster. You want a solution that uses the fewest possible services. What should you do? A. Add the cluster's API as a new type provider in Deployment Manager and use the new type to create the daemon set. B. Use the Deployment Manager runtime configurator to create a new config resource that contains the daemon set definition. C. With Deployment Manager, create a Compute Engine instance with a startup script that uses kubectl to create the daemon set. D. In the cluster's definition in Deployment Manager, add a metadata that has kubesystem as key and the daemon set manifest as value. You are the project owner of a GCP project and want to delegate control to colleagues to manage buckets and files in cloud storage. You want to follow Google recommended practices. Which IAM roles should you grant your colleagues? A. Project editor. B. Storage admin. C. Storage object admin. D. Storage object creator. You are creating an application that will run on Google Kubernetes Engine. You have identified MongoDB as the most suitable database system for your application and want to deploy a managed MongoDB environment that provides a support SLA. What should you do? A. Create a cloud Bigtable cluster and use the HBase API. B. Deploy MongoDB Atlas from the Google Cloud Marketplace. C. Download a MongoDB installation package and run it on Compute Engine instances. D. Download a MongoDB installation package and run it on a managed instance group. An external member of your team needs list access to compute images and disks in one of your projects. You want to follow Google recommended practices when you grant the required permissions to this user. What should you do? A. Create a custom role and add all the required compute. Disks. List permissions as included permissions. Grant the custom role to the user at the project level. B. Create a custom role based on the compute image user role. Add the compute disks list to the included permissions field. Grant the custom role to the user at the project level. C. Create a custom role based on the compute storage admin role. Exclude unnecessary permissions from the custom role. Grant the custom role to the user at the project level. D. Grant the compute storage admin role at the project level. You are using Looker Studio to visualize a table from your data warehouse that is built on top of BigQuery. Data is appended to the data warehouse during the day. At night, the daily summary is recalculated by overwriting the table. You just noticed that the charts in Looker Studio are broken, and you want to analyze the problem. What should you do? A. In Cloud Logging, create a filter for your Looker Studio report. B. Use the open-source CLI tool, Snapshot Debugger, to find out why the data was not refreshed correctly. C. Review the error reporting page in the Google Cloud Console to find any errors. D. Use the BigQuery interface to review the nightly job and look for any errors. You recently discovered that your developers are using many service account keys during their development process. While you work on a long-term improvement, you need to quickly implement a process to enforce short-lived service account credentials in your company. You have the following requirements. All service accounts that require a key should be created in a centralized project called PJSA. Service account keys should only be valid for 1 day. You need a Google-recommended solution that minimizes cost. What should you do? A. Implement a Cloud Run job to rotate all service account keys periodically in PJSA. Enforce an org policy to deny service account key creation with an exception to PJSA. B. Implement a Kubernetes cron job to rotate all service account keys periodically. Disable attachment of service accounts to resources in all projects, with an exception to PJSA. C. Enforce an org policy constraint allowing the lifetime of service account keys to be 24 hours. Enforce an org policy constraint denying service account key creation, with an exception on PJSA. D. Enforce a DENI org policy constraint over the lifetime of service account keys for 24 hours. Disable attachment of service accounts to resources in all projects, with an exception to PJSA. You use the Google Cloud Container Clusters command to create 2 Google Cloud Kubernetes (GKE) clusters, Prod Cluster and Dev Cluster. Prod Cluster is a standard cluster. Dev Cluster is an autopilot cluster. When you run the kubect l-get nodes command, you only see the nodes from Prod Cluster. Which commands should you run to check the node status for Dev Cluster? A. Google Cloud Container Clusters get credentials Dev Cluster kubect l-get nodes. B. G Cloud Container Clusters update generate password Dev Cluster kubect l-get nodes. C. Kubect l-config set context Dev Cluster kubect l-cluster info. D. Kubect l-config set credentials Dev Cluster kubect l-cluster info. Your application development team has created Docker images for an application that will be deployed on Google Cloud. Your team does not want to manage the infrastructure associated with this application. You need to ensure that the application can scale automatically as it gains popularity. What should you do? A. Create an instance template with the container image and deploy a managed instance group with autoscaling. B. Upload Docker images to Artifact Registry and deploy the application on Google Kubernetes Engine using standard mode. C. Upload Docker images to the cloud storage and deploy the application on Google Kubernetes Engine using standard mode. D. Upload Docker images to Artifact Registry and deploy the application on Cloud Run. Your company has a large quantity of unstructured data in different file formats. You want to perform ETL transformations on the data. You need to make the data accessible on Google Cloud, so it can be processed by a data flow job. What should you do? A. Upload the data to BigQuery using the BQ command line tool. B. Upload the data to cloud storage using the GRE Cloud Storage command. C. Upload the data into Cloud SQL using the import function in the Google Cloud Console. D. Upload the data into Cloud Spanner using the import function in the Google Cloud Console. During a recent audit of your existing Google Cloud resources, you discovered several users with email addresses outside of your Google Workspace domain. You want to ensure that your resources are only shared with users whose email addresses match your domain. You need to remove any mismatched users, and you want to avoid having to audit your resources to identify mismatched users. What should you do? A. Create a Cloud Scheduler task to regularly scan your projects and delete mismatched users. B. Create a Cloud Scheduler task to regularly scan your resources and delete mismatched users. C. Set an organizational policy constraint to limit identities by domain to automatically remove mismatched users. D. Set an organizational policy constraint to limit identities by domain, and then retroactively remove the existing mismatched users. You have 32 gigabytes of data in a single file that you need to upload to a nearline storage bucket. The WAN connection you are using is rated at 1 gigabit per second, and you are the only one on the connection. You want to use as much of the rated 1 gigabit per second as possible to transfer the file rapidly. How should you upload the file? A. Use the GCP console to transfer the file instead of GSUTIL. B. Enable parallel composite uploads using GSUTIL on the file transfer. C. Decrease the TCP window size on the machine initiating the transfer. D. Change the storage class of the bucket from nearline to multi-regional. You have an application that runs on Compute Engine VM instances in a custom virtual private cloud, VPC. Your company's security policies only allow the use of internal IP addresses on VM instances and do not let VM instances connect to the internet. You need to ensure that the application can access a file hosted in a cloud storage bucket within your project. What should you do? A. Enable private service access on the cloud storage bucket. B. Add storage.googleapis.com to the list of restricted services in a VPC service controls perimeter and add your project to the list of protected projects. C. Enable private Google access on the subnet within the custom VPC. D. Deploy a CloudNet instance and route the traffic to the dedicated IP address of the cloud storage bucket. You need to add a group of new users to Cloud Identity. Some of the users already have existing Google accounts. You want to follow one of Google's recommended practices and avoid conflicting accounts. What should you do? A. Invite the user to transfer their existing account. B. Invite the user to use an email alias to resolve the conflict. C. Tell the user that they must delete their existing account. D. Tell the user to remove all personal email from the existing account. You need to manage a third-party application that will run on a Compute Engine instance. Other Compute Engine instances are already running with default configuration. Application installation files are hosted on cloud storage. You need to access these files from the new instance without allowing other virtual machines, VMs, to access these files. What should you do? A. Create the instance with the default Compute Engine service account. Grant the service account permissions on cloud storage. B. Create the instance with the default Compute Engine service account. Add metadata to the objects on cloud storage that matches the metadata on the new instance. C. Create a new service account and assign this service account to the new instance. Grant the service account permissions on cloud storage. D. Create a new service account and assign this service account to the new instance. Add metadata to the objects on cloud storage that matches the metadata on the new instance. Your web application has been running successfully on Cloud Run for Anthos. You want to evaluate an updated version of the application with a specific percentage of your production users. Canary deployment. What should you do? A. Create a new service with the new version of the application. Split traffic between this version and the version that is currently running. B. Create a new revision with the new version of the application. Split traffic between this version and the version that is currently running. C. Create a new service with the new version of the application. Add an HTTP load balancer in front of both services. D. Create a new revision with the new version of the application. Add an HTTP load balancer in front of both revisions. You have developed a containerized web application that will serve internal colleagues during business hours. You want to ensure that no costs are incurred outside of the hours the application is used. You have just created a new Google Cloud project and want to deploy the application. What should you do? A. Deploy the container on Cloud Run for Anthos and set the minimum number of instances to 0. B. Deploy the container on Cloud Run, fully managed, and set the minimum number of instances to 0. C. Deploy the container on App Engine flexible environment with autoscaling and set the value min_instances to 0 in the app YAML. D. Deploy the container on App Engine flexible environment with manual scaling and set the value instances to 0 in the app YAML. You are managing a project for the Business Intelligence (BI) department in your company. A data pipeline ingests data into BigQuery via streaming. You want the users in the BI department to be able to run the custom SQL queries against the latest data in BigQuery. What should you do? A. Create a Data Studio dashboard that uses the related BigQuery tables as a source and give the BI team view access to the Data Studio dashboard. B. Create a service account for the BI team and distribute a new private key to each member of the BI team. C. Use Cloud Scheduler to schedule a batch dataflow job to copy the data from BigQuery to the BI team's internal data warehouse. D. Assign the IAM role of BigQuery user to a Google group that contains the members of the BI team. You will have several applications running on different compute engine instances in the same project. You want to specify, at a more granular level, the service account each instance uses when calling Google Cloud APIs. What should you do? A. When creating the instances, specify a service account for each instance. B. When creating the instances, assign the name of each service account as instance metadata. C. After starting the instances, use GRE Cloud Compute Instances Update to specify a service account for each instance. D. After starting the instances, use Cloud Compute Instances Update to assign the name of the relevant service account as instance metadata. You are about to deploy a new Enterprise Resource Planning (ERP) system on Google Cloud. The application holds the full database in memory for fast data access, and you need to configure the most appropriate resources on Google Cloud for this application. What should you do? A. Provision preemptible compute engine instances. B. Provision compute engine instances with GPUs attached. C. Provision compute engine instances with local SSDs attached. D. Provision compute engine instances with M1 machine type. You are developing a financial trading application that will be used globally. Data is stored and queried using a relational structure, and clients from all over the world should get the exact identical state of the data. The application will be deployed in multiple regions to provide the lowest latency to end users. You need to select a storage option for the application data while minimizing latency. What should you do? A. Use Cloud Bigtable for data storage. B. Use Cloud SQL for data storage. C. Use Cloud Spanner for data storage. D. Use Firestore for data storage. You are running multiple VPC native Google Kubernetes Engine clusters in the same subnet. The IPs available for the nodes are exhausted, and you want to ensure that the clusters can grow in nodes when needed. What should you do? A. Create a new subnet in the same region as the subnet being used. B. Add an alias IP range to the subnet used by the GKE clusters. C. Create a new VPC and set up VPC peering with the existing VPC. D. Expand the CIDR range of the relevant subnet for the cluster. Your existing application running in Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE, consists of multiple pods running on 4 GKEN1 standard 2 nodes. You need to deploy additional pods requiring N2 HiMem 16 nodes without any downtime. What should you do? A. Use Google Cloud Container Clusters Upgrade. Deploy the new services. B. Create a new node pool and specify machine type N2 Euro HiMem Hero 16. Deploy the new pods. C. Create a new cluster with N2 Euro HiMem Euro 16 nodes. Redeploy the pods and delete the old cluster. D. Create a new cluster with both N1 Euro Standard Euro 2 and N2 Euro HiMem Euro 16 nodes. Redeploy the pods and delete the old cluster. Your company has workloads running on Compute Engine and on-premises. The Google Cloud Virtual Private Cloud, VPC, is connected to your WAN over a Virtual Private Network, VPN. You need to deploy a new Compute Engine instance and ensure that no public internet traffic can be routed to it. What should you do? A. Create the instance without a public IP address. B. Create the instance with private Google access enabled. C. Create a deny all egress firewall rule on the VPC network. D. Create a route on the VPC to route all traffic to the instance over the VPN tunnel. You are working for a startup that was officially registered as a business 6 months ago. As your customer base grows, your use of Google Cloud increases. You want to allow all engineers to create new projects without asking them for their credit card information. What should you do? A. Create a billing account, associate a payment method with it, and provide all project creators with permission to associate that billing account with their projects. B. Grant all engineers permission to create their own billing accounts for each new project. C. Apply for monthly invoiced billing and have a single invoice for the project paid by the finance team. D. Create a billing account, associate it with a monthly purchase order, PO, and send the PO to Google Cloud. You are asked to set up application performance monitoring on Google Cloud projects A, B, and C as a single pane of glass. You want to monitor CPU, memory, and disk. What should you do? A. Enable API and then share charts from project A, B, and CB. Enable API and then give the metrics. reader role to projects A, B, and CC. Enable API, and then use default dashboards to view all projects in sequence. D. Enable API, create a workspace under project A, and then add projects B and C. You are developing a new application and are looking for a Jenkins installation to build and deploy your source code. You want to automate the installation as quickly and easily as possible. What should you do? A. Deploy Jenkins through the Google Cloud Marketplace. B. Create a new compute engine instance. Run the Jenkins executable. C. Create a new Kubernetes engine cluster. Create a deployment for the Jenkins image. D. Create an instance template with the Jenkins executable. Create a managed instance group with this template. Your company runs one batch process in an on-premises server that takes around 30 hours to complete. The task runs monthly, can be performed offline, and must be restarted if interrupted. You want to migrate this workload to the cloud while minimizing cost. What should you do? A. Migrate the workload to a compute engine preemptible VM. B. Migrate the workload to a Google Kubernetes engine cluster with preemptible nodes. C. Migrate the workload to a compute engine VM. Start and stop the instance as needed. D. Create an instance template with preemptible VMs on. Create a managed instance group from the template and adjust target CPU utilization. Migrate the workload. You deployed a new application inside your Google Kubernetes engine cluster using the YAML file specified below. You check the status of the deployed pods and notice that one of them is still in pending status. You want to find out why the pod is stuck in pending status. What should you do? A. Review details of the MyAppService service object and check for error messages. B. Review details of the MyAppDeployment object and check for error messages. C. Review details of MyAppDeployment 58 DDBB 995 LP 86 meters pod and check for warning messages. D. View logs of the container in MyAppDeployment 58 DDBB 995 LP 86 meters pod and check for warning messages. Your projects incurred more costs than you expected last month. Your research reveals that a development GKE container emitted a huge number of logs, which resulted in higher costs. You want to disable the logs quickly using the minimum number of steps. What should you do? A. 1. Go to the logs ingestion window in Stackdriver Logging and disable the log source for the GKE container resource. B. 1. Go to the logs ingestion window in Stackdriver Logging and disable the log source for the GKE cluster operations resource. C. 1. Go to the GKE console and delete existing clusters. 2. Recreate a new cluster. 3. Clear the option to enable legacy Stackdriver logging. D. 1. Go to the GKE console and delete existing clusters. 2. Recreate a new cluster. 3. Clear the option to enable legacy Stackdriver monitoring. You have a virtual machine that is currently configured with 2 vCPUs and 4 GB of memory. It is running out of memory. You want to upgrade the virtual machine to have 8 GB of memory. What should you do? A. Rely on live migration to move the workload to a machine with more memory. B. Use Google Cloud to add metadata to the VM. Set the key to required memory size and the value to 8 GB. C. Stop the VM, change the machine type to N1 standard 8, and start the VM. D. Stop the VM, increase the memory to 8 GB, and start the VM. You need to select and configure compute resources for a set of batch processing jobs. These jobs take around 2 hours to complete and are run nightly. You want to minimize service costs. What should you do? A. Select Google Kubernetes Engine. Use a single node cluster with a small instance type. B. Select Google Kubernetes Engine. Use a 3-node cluster with micro instance types. C. Select Compute Engine. Use preemptible VM instances of the appropriate standard machine type. D. Select Compute Engine. Use VM instance types that support microbursting. You create a new Google Kubernetes Engine (GKE) cluster and want to make sure that it always runs a supported and stable version of Kubernetes. What should you do? A. Enable the Node Auto Repair feature for your GKE cluster. B. Enable the Node Auto Upgrades feature for your GKE cluster. C. Select the latest available cluster version for your GKE cluster. D. Select Euro Container Optimized OS (COS) Euro as a node image for your GKE cluster. You have one project called ProjSA where you manage all your service accounts. You want to be able to use a service account from this project to take snapshots of VMs running in another project called ProjVM. What should you do? A. Download the private key from the service account and add it to each VM's custom metadata. B. Download the private key from the service account and add the private key to each VM's SSH keys. C. Grant the service account the IAM role of compute storage admin in the project called ProjVM. D. When creating the VMs, set the service account's API scope for Compute Engine to read/write. You have created an application that is packaged into a Docker image. You want to deploy the Docker image as a workload on Google Kubernetes Engine. What should you do? A. Upload the image to cloud storage and create a Kubernetes service referencing the image. B. Upload the image to cloud storage and create a Kubernetes deployment referencing the image. C. Upload the image to Artifact Registry and create a Kubernetes service referencing the image. D. Upload the image to Artifact Registry and create a Kubernetes deployment referencing the image. You have experimented with Google Cloud using your own credit card and expensed the cost to your company. Your company wants to streamline the billing process and charge the costs of your projects to their monthly invoice. What should you do? A. Grant the financial team the IAM role of a Euro billing account user hang a Euro on the billing account linked to your credit card. B. Set up BigQuery billing export and grant your financial department IAM access to query the data. C. Create a ticket with Google Billing Support to ask them to send the invoice to your company. D. Change the billing account of your projects to the billing account of your company. You are building an application that stores relational data from users. Users across the globe will use this application. Your CTO is concerned about the scaling requirements because the size of the user base is unknown. You need to implement a database solution that can scale with your user growth with minimum configuration changes. Which storage solution should you use? A. Cloud SQL. B. Firestore. C. Cloud Spanner. D. Bigtable. You need to enable traffic between multiple groups of compute engine instances that are currently running two different GCP projects. Each group of compute engine instances is running in its own VPC. What should you do? A. Verify that both projects are in a GCP organization. Create a new VPC and add all instances. B. Verify that both projects are in a GCP organization. Share the VPC from one project and request that the compute engine instances in the other project use this shared VPC. C. Verify that you are the project administrator of both projects. Create two new VPCs and add all instances. D. Verify that you are the project administrator of both projects. Create a new VPC and add all instances. You have created an application that is packaged into a Docker image. You want to deploy the Docker image as a workload on Google Kubernetes Engine. What should you do? A. Upload the image to cloud storage and create a Kubernetes service referencing the image. B. Upload the image to cloud storage and create a Kubernetes deployment referencing the image. C. Upload the image to Container Registry and create a Kubernetes service referencing the image. D. Upload the image to Container Registry and create a Kubernetes deployment referencing the image. You created several resources in multiple Google Cloud projects. All projects are linked to different billing accounts. To better estimate future charges, you want to have a single visual representation of all costs incurred. You want to include new cost data as soon as possible. What should you do? A. Configure billing data export to BigQuery and visualize the data in Data Studio. B. Visit the cost table page to get a CSV export and visualize it using Data Studio. C. Fill all resources in the pricing calculator to get an estimate of the monthly cost. D. Use the reports view in the Cloud Billing console to view the desired cost information. You have a batch workload that runs every night and uses a large number of virtual machines, VMs. It is fault tolerant and can tolerate some of the VMs being terminated. The current cost of VMs is too high. What should you do? A. Run a test using simulated maintenance events. If the test is successful, use preemptible N1 standard VMs when running future jobs. B. Run a test using simulated maintenance events. If the test is successful, use N1 standard VMs when running future jobs. C. Run a test using a managed instance group. If the test is successful, use N1 standard VMs in the managed instance group when running future jobs. D. Run a test using N1 standard VMs instead of N2. If the test is successful, use N1 standard VMs when running future jobs.